Nickey, I think it's time to make a podcast.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am very excited to sit down and make this happen. You have been, honestly, on my guest list of people that I wanted to have on the show truly for quite some time.
Well, thank you.
And
I do know that because you asked me during
Yes,
it.
yes.
You asked me when I wasn't ready.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a while ago. We had chatted about it, and but we're making it happen now.
Yeah.
It was still destined to happen. And what's also funny is like not only like did I have you on the guest list, but via a few other past guests that I've had on this show, they also were like, "Hey, have you sat down with Nickey yet?"
Oh,
and I'm
that's
like,
so nice,
and so like you've also come at the reference or referral of many other people as well. So like, just know there's a lot of people that's been wanting you on the show, me included. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you. That
yes,
means a lot.
I truly am excited to literally get to know you for the first time. Because for sure in the comedy scene here in Columbus, like I have just like heard your name just much longer than before I ever saw you live, and then I did finally see you live, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I get why people talk about Nickey. Like, she absolutely rules.
Oh,
and of course, we're gonna, dig into the normal questions of like, oh, how did you get into it and all that sort of stuff. But yes, that's for the podcast. But also, like, I'm genuinely curious of like, okay, yeah, cool. I want to finally dive in to get to know the story of Nickey. So,
do you remember where you saw me the first time?
it was at Hashtag.
Okay.
It was at Hashtag.
Yeah.
I believe probably 2.5 years ago at this point, I think.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the show
was. There improv and stand-up?
There might have been.
Okay.
There might have been. And I can't remember
which one that was.
maybe you were hosting.
Maybe.
And doing kind of like mini sets in between each thing or something. But I do, it was like one of the very first shows I ever went to at Hashtag.
Okay.
And so instantly I'm like, I'm getting to see Nickey live. Like, all right, this place is pretty cool. Like, this is all right. Because for the longest time, like I would never go to live comedy shows. Like, I just didn't. I've loved comedy forever and wanted to be involved in it and do comedy and all this sort of stuff. But like, I often will let the introverted, lazy part of me take over and be like, I don't really feel like doing anything, even though I would like to. So
I know that feeling all too well.
Yes,
I do.
yes.
I know that feeling all too well. I feel like all creatives have that in some way. Where we're like, unless we're doing the thing, it's hard to get out and see the thing.
Yes. And even getting yourself started to like, because you sit and you have that battle where you're like, I really don't feel like going and doing this, even though internally I know I want to.
I only have 5 hours left in the day.
Literally, yes. And then it's that dumb internal battle where like, you're pretty aware that when you go and once you're there, you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But there's something about just the motivation of getting there.
Right.
To do the thing. And so for me, even going to a comedy show for a while was that. And then I think once I started making a lot more friends with comedians and stuff, I was like, I should probably be going to a lot more of these shows and going and experiencing everybody's stuff a little bit more.
I say the same thing to myself though.
Really?
Because I do a lot of stand-up, but I don't get out to watch as much. I've been trying to be better about that and like get out at least like once a month to just like see a show.
I've definitely fallen off a bit in the last like 6 months. Like there was a streak there where probably every other week or something I was like out at some sort of a comedy show and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh man, I forgot how much I love sitting at home. and then oftentimes I'll forget when there's a show happening too. Like if I don't add it to my calendar, it just doesn't exist. And so I'll see somebody post like, man, tonight's show was awesome. And I was like, I was gonna go to that.
I mean, I can spend hours talking on that and like how to get people to see that shows are happening and how to remind them that shows are happening. It's so hard.
What is that? Because like obviously like I promote a bunch of stuff, right? I do podcasts, short films, and all this sort of stuff. So that's its own battle of like getting anybody to see stuff. But like, because how many years have you been doing comedy?
So I started when I was 19 and I'm 40 now. Okay. So, but I say 20 years that I've been doing it. I started doing comedy in Columbus. I think it was either 2005 or 2006. I know there's so many like comedians that have these like, this is my comedy anniversary. And I have no idea of how I would even know like what was the first.
Right.
Yeah. Time that I did it on stage here.
How like has even getting people to come to shows, how has that changed over like being involved in something you've been actively promoting that long? Like I've even seen changes of like when I really started to actively do stuff was kind of right when social media was like really popping off. Like when
Yeah.
Facebook was like a normal place to go and Instagram was like fun food photos. And like if you posted something, people saw it.
Yeah.
Where now it's this crazy thing. But like, what has that trajectory been like for you?
Well, you know how like people will make a flyer for a show, like a digital flyer. I used to make physical flyers for my shows.
Yeah.
I would take a picture of myself. Sometimes I would write it out by hand, and then I would go to the library and make copies.
Okay.
And I remember I was working at a restaurant, and I would like post my little flyer on like the restaurant bulletin board in the back for like my coworkers.
I love that.
Or when I first started, I was in college, and so I would make flyers and we would post them on whatever boards we were allowed to in college.
Okay.
But yeah, and then MySpace happened, and so then I was promoting a lot on MySpace. But again, it's just like, it's just your friends. I mean, I guess it's still that way too, really, with social media. It's
right.
It starts with your friends, and then it's
Yeah.
fans, followers, whatever.
And then your friends stop seeing anything about you.
Yes.
And then they're like, hey, when are you
Yeah.
doing that thing? And I'm like, I just did it 2 days ago.
I
What are you
know.
talking about? But
Yeah.
if you post a flyer today about a show in 2 days, they might not even see it for 7 days.
Right. But then if you post it too early, people forget about it. So
Yep.
it's really hard to know. There's all kinds of ways that people try to trick the algorithm.
Right.
I remember when, so I used to do a live trivia show with magician Eric Tate, and it was called The Quiz Box. It was so much fun, one of my favorite shows that I ever did. And when we had our very last show, I posted a picture of me and Eric, and I had written this whole thing about like, that very much sounded like we were getting engaged or getting married. It was like, we are going to be engaged in our last performance of celebrating a life together as co-hosts. And the algorithm pushed that.
Okay.
Because the algorithm will look for things that are like, wedding announcements, baby announcements. I mean, sometimes you'll find a Facebook friend that you forgot you had is all of a sudden in your feed because they got
That's
married
actually true.
right? Yeah. So I always look to see like what's getting pushed into my feed and how can I trick the algorithm into thinking my promo is that.
I'm about to start promoting every episode of this podcast pretending I've married the guest. That's what I'm about to start doing. I'm going to be like, live podcast marriage, first time ever, so happy. And just get some clickbait for people to come check out these episodes.
I don't know how many times it would work before they figure you out, but like, I mean, I think that's sort of why you see people, or why you see these headlines that are like, you'll never guess what number 3 is, or wait until the end.
Number
or like,
6 will blow your mind.
Yeah, comedian destroys heckler. Like those were the things that like if the algorithm was picking it up, then everybody else was trying to copy that to get pushed in.
That is the thing. Like I know we're just taking like the deep dive into like the internet's hard to navigate, but like as someone who like creates for a living, like I can't pretend like that stuff isn't annoying to navigate because like I don't like the approach, even though I'm going to jokingly say I wish I could. Like I don't like the clickbaity approach, like the rage bait, like the idea of even like creating stupid thumbnail images for YouTube videos. I'm like, dude, I don't want to make a stupid face with a red circle. I just want to have a cool picture of a guest on a podcast and be like, we talk about their life, and I think it's important that you should hear it. And the fact that I'm not like, Nickey Winkelman slays Columbus comedy scene and calls out everybody. It's like the fact that I'm not putting that on there.
Yeah.
It's like that is, we could probably talk for the next 2 hours just about.
Well, and it's,
that.
There's a difference between trying to get new people to see your things and trying to get the people that already want to see your thing. Because sometimes I'm putting stuff on like Facebook, for example. I don't do a lot on Facebook anymore. I like Instagram better.
Yeah.
But I'll put something out there just so that like my actual friends will see what I'm doing.
Right.
And there's a friend that I went to high school with, and she would comment on all of my posts about shows that I was just like, how come I always see this after it's over? And so then the last time I had one, I just like tagged her in the comments because I'm really just trying to get people I actually know who want to come see me see it. And instead what they're seeing is ads or things that they think, or whoever they is, think they should be seeing instead of what they want to be seeing, which is me.
Exactly. We all want to see more Nickey, dang it. What the heck? No, but I literally 100% agree with you. Like,
it's tricky.
And I feel like the reason we've immediately jumped into this is because this is a conversation that I feel like I am having with every maker, doer, entrepreneur, creator, artist of any kind. it's immediately, you know, people are like, yeah, I made a thing and 20 people saw it and I thought it was really important and I thought it was cool, but it didn't go viral.
Yeah.
Like, where's your headspace at with all of that, of like how you navigate it? Like, I know we're talking about it, how, hey, it's annoying and things have changed over the years and it's so weird and so dumb, but like genuinely when you are promoting things or trying to obviously get your name out there and all this sort of stuff, like, do you feel like you actively battle with it? Have you settled into like, you know what, I don't care, it's gonna work if it's gonna work?
Yeah,
like
more the latter.
Okay.
Like I mean, there are things that I know I can do to either trick it or to. This is gonna sound so bad, but the algorithm also likes hot girls.
Facts. Yes.
So if I post a bunch of flyers and there's text or info or whatever, and especially if I'm doing it in my stories, I will mix in a mirror selfie or a picture where I look cute. And it is so interesting to me to watch the view count on my stories go up.
Yep, that totally makes sense.
And it's wild because, and you know that it's not happening on purpose because of that, because they have to click through the other things first to get there. But it's the algorithm is pushing it because they're like, oh, there's a hot girl.
Yep.
Not that I'm a hot girl, but you know.
No, but that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Like whether it's like the like hot person mentality, or it's also just like the human mentality of like, if you promoting this podcast, for example, something I am trying to like build a discipline in that I'm like slowly getting better at is like just putting my face in front of a camera. Like obviously I'm here on camera now, but like rather than just taking clips from the episode and posting them and being like, someone will think this is interesting.
Yeah.
What I'm learning I probably need to be doing is just filming with my iPhone and being like, hey guys, I just dropped a new episode with Nickey. We talk about some cool things. Like, and I'm not even saying that's bad.
Right.
But it's an extra like exercise that even though I'm totally comfortable being in front of a camera and hosting things, it's still enough extra energy to make something that I'm like, I have fun having the full conversations.
Yeah, I already made the thing.
Yeah,
I shouldn't have to make another thing to get people to see the thing that I made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that thing where I'm like, well, I guess someone somewhere or an algorithm could sit and be like, well, we understand you're promoting your cool podcast, but it looks too well filmed. Why didn't you do this with your iPhone? You know, like I feel like that organically created stuff, natural. Like I feel like why TikTok is gigantic.
Yeah.
Because that's just everybody with their smartphone filming whatever's happening in their lives.
It's interesting though, because like I see, you know, people with you've got that organic like where it's like selfie mode, they're just talking to the camera. But then if you see stand-up clips, the better they're filmed, the better they're going to do.
Yeah.
And you need to have edits and cuts and stuff like that. If you just have somebody with their cell phone in the back of the room and it's a stagnant shot, like people probably aren't going to watch it.
Right.
So it's weird. It's just tricky.
It is.
Yeah.
It's just such a weird balance of like nothing is 100% right and also not really 100% wrong either.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I guess I'm just going to make 5 different versions of everything that we do. Because one of them will attract somebody somewhere, and then we'll just kind of see what happens. Like,
I don't put too much effort into it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I'll throw in that selfie. And it's so funny because I saw somebody post something about, you know, women, when you're posting these hot pictures of yourselves, what kind of man are you really trying to get? I'm like, I'm not trying to get a man. I'm trying to get people to watch my content.
Yeah, I want someone to buy a ticket to my show. I don't care who you are.
I'm not trying to hook up. I'm trying to sell tickets.
Yeah. I'm trying to run a business here. What do you,
This is just what the internet wants. Like, I don't want this, but,
right.
You know, but I don't put too much effort into it because comedy for me is, I love it. It's my passion. It's not my everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really this always sounds bad, but I'm owning it. I'm not trying to do more than what I'm doing. Yeah. I'm very happy with where I am. You know, like I said, I started 20 years ago. For the longest time, it was always this like, am I going to do it full time? What does it take to do it full time? I had went back to school for a while, and then comedy was doing well, so I dropped out of school, and I was like trying to do that full time, and then I was waiting tables and also doing comedy, and then all these different things. And the idea of making it being that you quit your job to do it full time is no longer what I want. Mm-hmm. I like my job. I need consistency as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and I'm I don't want to say that I'm just doing it for me, because I do still feel like there's things that I have to say, and I like to reach people and I like to make people laugh. But I always tell people, whatever you do with your talent is yours. And nobody gets to tell you that you're wasting it by not trying to do more with it. It's yours. It doesn't belong to anybody else. So sometimes people say to me, oh, well, you're wasting your talent by not. Well, I'm not. This is what I want to do with it. So I'm happy having a day job, having a family, and also having comedy, and then figuring out where that balance sits.
I don't know if I can like overstate how much I actually love that explanation of things, because I personally believe that is an incredibly healthy place to be with like a creative endeavor, artistic endeavor, whatever you want to call it. Like, I feel like that clarity that you just explained is something that like a lot of people who are in pursuit of something are kind of chasing.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not to say that, like, of course, yes, there's a lot of people who are like, no, I want this to be my everything. I do want this to be, this is my plan A. There is no plan B. But I also think that the reality for a lot of people is they would probably be more comfortable, and I mean comfortable in the right ways, having a clarity like that of like figuring out where's my bar actually at, instead of thinking that like I'm a failure unless I don't achieve this.
Right. Yeah.
Figure out where you're actually content with that bar being of, well, I'm achieving my goal actively by doing this. I'm feeling good. I'm a part of fun communities. I'm creating in the way that I want to create, connecting to people, whatever it is. And maybe I don't need more, because I feel like we're always programmed to like, no, more, don't celebrate, get more. And like, so much of what you just explained, I feel like has been even my own personal, like, creative journey, specifically over the last handful of years, of like finding like, what does true self-confidence look like? And then how do I take that self-confidence into everything that I do? Rather than like what I used to do at the beginning of everything was there wasn't really confidence, because unless I was that cliche definition of successful, I couldn't be confident. Yeah. Because I was like, I'm failing. I'm not there yet. Right. So even though I was accomplishing cool things and doing fun stuff and making growth, like that lack of ability to be present or to have that clarity of like, well, hey, no, let's be happy with what we have. We can still want more. Yes. But I need to be happy with this. Like, that took me years to uncover. Yeah. And I feel like with so many people, it takes years to really uncover. Like, it took me a really long time. And honestly, it took the pandemic, because I, oddly enough, took a step away from stand-up right before the pandemic hit. Okay. Like, I had decided in, December, I think, of 2019 that I was going to take a step away. And then I had planned for my final show for a while to be February of 2020. Good timing. I know. Yeah. Just get it over with before everything. Yeah. I caused it. No, I didn't. No. That's what happened. Everyone was like, her last show, shut it down. Shut everything down. We're done. Yeah, but I wanted to take a step back because for a number of things. But I was feeling overwhelmed with like, what am I doing with this? I felt like a lot of pressure. I felt I was struggling with things at home. I was doing, so I was working at Upfront at Shadowbox Live, and we were booking shows, I think, four nights a week. And it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays we were filling. Now, Wednesdays was pretty much always improv. Tuesdays was me and Jimmy Mack. We did a show called Tuesdays with Mack and Winks, and so we were always doing something different. Those were kind of the most laborious shows for me, because I was trying to fill every week something different. Yeah. And then Thursdays we would have some monthly things, and then Fridays we had some monthly things. So those were a little bit easier, but it was still hard work. But I got to a point where my son at age 2 or 3 would see me put on makeup, and he would say, "Mommy, go to work?" And I was just like, "Ooh, I don't want that. I don't want my son to think that like I'm leaving." Yeah. I don't know. It was like, because I was either like at home like a sloth with no makeup on, or like if I was making myself look nice, I was leaving. He's like, "You're going somewhere." Yeah. You're going somewhere.
And I missed some firsts. I missed, first steps and things like that. So, and he became very, very close with his dad, which is wonderful, but it was also hard for me as a mom to miss some things.
To feel like, to miss out on anything.
And I was like, how do I create this balance? How do I find this balance? And I was like, I just want to step away from everything and just spend some time at home and not be able to leave my house. And when I do leave my house, have to wear a mask. And then it happened.
Right. Yeah. You're like, if only these specific circumstances could just happen in the world,
right.
like it'd be easier. So then if I'm leaving, I don't have to wear any makeup because I'm just masking up. Yep. It doesn't matter. Then, honestly, if everybody else just also was trapped in their house, then none of us care about what we look like. Everything would just be easier.
People were saying, they were like, well, you're going to come back. You're going to come back to comedy. And I'd always kind of planned to, but they were like, oh, you're going to miss it and you're going to see all the other shows happening. Well, there weren't any other shows happening.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah. But so the timing was crazy, but it was what I needed. And I spent that time, with my son, with my family. It was hard. I mean, it was hard. That was a hard time for everybody.
Right.
But I was, in some ways, kind of ready for it. Like, I needed the break. And I think a lot of people did.
I genuinely, I've had similar conversations to this, that when it comes to pandemic, clearly, terrible thing that's actually happening, happening, all that sort of stuff, 100%.
And scary, yeah.
But at the same time, had these strange benefits to all humans, where it's like, hey, here's what it looks like when the world kind of stops and not everyone has to spend every waking moment working. Here's what it's like to just stay at home and bake bread.
Yeah.
Or to stay at home and do this or to whatever. Obviously, again, chaos was happening. But, this weird, alternate example of, here's a peek into kind of what life was, kind of supposed to be like without the sickness, right?
Yeah.
And it was just, people just hanging out and doing stuff. And I say all that to say, I do think that effect was, widespread across so many people, myself included, because, I had been kind of in, a grind mentality for years, trying to make it as, a self-employed freelancer.
Yes.
And having to slow down, yes, I was like, oh my God, when will I ever be able to make money again? This is scary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, wait, I'm just supposed to stay home and order a pizza and then watch a movie? That's all I have to do today? It allowed that space and that time, I think, for people to, while we're panicking, we also had no choice but to slow down and to kind of acknowledge what our life was really like individually.
Yes.
While at large it was chaotic, individually I think everybody got that opportunity. Mostly.
Yeah. I mean, some people had individual chaos as well. I'm not
of course.
But but I think a lot of things changed in a good way. I think people started talking about health, mental health and self-care a lot more, and now you see that's kind of stayed where it's okay for people to go to therapy and stuff. And I really feel like that boomed a lot during the pandemic because everybody needed it.
Yeah.
But everybody's always needed it.
Right.
It just wasn't. There was more of a taboo around it than it is now. Now it's oh no, we do need to take care of ourselves. And I think that hustle and grind culture that was before. Not that it isn't still there, but it's not nearly as toxic as it was before. Before it was if you take a nap, you're lazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now it's no, it's okay for you to work 3 jobs, but also wash your face. You know what I mean?
Yeah. People are understanding that rest is productive.
Yes,
I feel like
it's
that
necessary.
Was rarely a thing I ever heard get talked about years ago.
Yeah.
Where now even people saying, no, rest is productive. I'm like, right, yeah, because I used to be that person.
Yeah.
I would feel weird and guilty, because this even goes back to the dream chasing thing that we were talking about earlier of if I'm not reaching the goal and I'm not all or nothing, then it's just nothing, right? If it's not all. And that was me for a handful of years where I was, so scared of, self-employment not working because, I mean, it can stop working at any moment in time and it's very difficult always, but just going nonstop all the time, I would sit and if I sat during the day and watched a movie, I felt guilty because I was like, what could you have done with that hour and a half? Yeah. You could have messaged a client, you could have pitched or something, you could have edited this thing you need to finish. What are you doing? And being able to shed some of that guilt and be like, no. I ultimately we have all done more than enough actively to earn any rest that we can take.
Yeah. It's okay to have working hours and non-working hours.
Yes.
And you don't just have to be asleep in your non-working hours.
Right. Yeah. It's not just you're unconscious. That's when you're not allowed to
and I would feel guilty not taking gigs or not doing something, or even doing things for myself. And that also became complex when I became a mom, because it was like, well, I have to give everything to this small person.
Yeah.
But then also not feeling guilty as far as like abandoning my career, but then also not feeling guilty about wanting to do things with my career if it did mean that I was nights away from him, and balancing that out.
Was figuring out that kind of like harmony, like, I'm sure the answer is yes, but I guess maybe the specifics of like, how long do you feel like that took for you to really uncover?
I'm still figuring it out.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still figuring it out. My son's father and I split, so we now have 50-50 custody. So that, in a way, makes it easier to know when I can take, not when I can take it, but when I want to.
Yeah,
because
it gives
I only
a little bit
have
of
him.
structure
Yes, I have him half the time,
Yep.
and the time that I have with him, I want to have with him. So I don't, unless it's something that's like a really great opportunity, I typically say no if I get offered something when I have my son.
Yeah.
And so I have half the time that I don't have him, and I can. This sounds so bad. Like, I live that life for me.
Yeah. No, I don't. I don't.
Sorry, I
personally,
keep hitting the microphone.
Yeah.
So I live that life for me, and then when I have my son, I live that life for him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not. Again, that's not reality, right? Like, and most people don't have that choice, unless you are like in a 50-50 parent situation. So you got to find those balances for yourself, and find ways of not feeling guilty about it on either side.
Yes. Yes.
It's still tough. It is still tough.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're, just as like an outsider to all of this, obviously we're talking about it for the first time. Like, I don't feel like any guilt has to come with any of that stuff, or nor does it sound bad, because it's like, no, because of the way things worked out, the structure of my life changed to where I can identify how I can be best present in these certain moments.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
It's like when your son is there, you can be like, cool, that is where my energy is going.
Yes.
And I'm going to lessen any other outside noise because I get to be present in this moment.
Yeah.
The same way where it's like, okay, I'm co-parenting now. And all right, I know from a structure and a schedule standpoint that this weekend or this whatever, I've got it free to myself. So what decisions can I make to be more present in that moment? Whether it is, maybe you just take the weekend to yourself and you watch movies, right?
And sometimes I just rest.
Yeah, or you take a gig and you're out and you're working and you're doing the thing or whatever. Like, again, I think all of that trickles down into that, like, being able to identify those present moments and being able to identify, like, well, okay, like how can I take this structure and make the most of it from a rest standpoint, from a work standpoint, from a whatever. And so again, as an outside, perspective, it's like, I that's great to be able to identify those things. And there's nothing wrong, right, with us taking those moments of like, this is how I can best show up.
I think there's something interesting and strange about our society in that, like, if you have a traditional like 9 to 5, like you punch in, you punch out, and like you're at work during that time. Mm-hmm. That's when you're at work. And everybody just accepts you're at work during that time.
Yeah.
But then the choices you make outside of that 9 to 5 are much more subject to judgment.
Yes.
In this strange way, like how much time are you spending with your kids, how much time are you spending with your family, how much time are you spending with your friends or with yourself or on your creative endeavors. And because you're left to choose that time, or how much time are you spending resting or sleeping or exercising or eating or anything, you're left to choose those things. People we pass judgment on ourselves and we pass judgment on each other, but that 9 to 5 is never argued.
No.
You're at work.
It's like, oh, you have a job. Of course you're doing that thing. You shouldn't be doing anything else. And then, when you're home, it's like, well, what other productive thing are you doing? You should just go back to work is what you know.
Right. It's so strange how, like, that's never argued. Well, you're at work.
Right. And that's especially, like that was a thing that I still am actively kind of trying to shake off the weight from. But like over the years, I've had to battle that sort of ordeal from just a misunderstanding standpoint of like, being a self-employed person, thankfully I can make my own schedule. I can decide whether I'm working super hard or maybe I'm relaxing a little bit or being lazy or whatever. But like for so many years early on, both internally it was a lot heavier of a feeling, and also even externally I would get that misunderstanding where people were like, so what do you do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I took a design job, or I did a photo shoot yesterday or a video shoot last week, and like that's kind of my big thing for this month, and I can kind of go a couple weeks until I need to do the next thing. And obviously, again, I'm like, quote unquote, grinding to like find the next thing always.
Yeah, right.
So there was no 9 to 5. It was 24/7 essentially. But like people wouldn't understand. They're like, so I don't understand what do you do? What do you mean you're going to go design right now? It's 10 p.m. You're going to go to your room and design a thing. What do you mean work? It's like,
yeah.
And again, because it's out of that 9 to 5 structure, it became this like strange and confusing thing. And because I also felt like I had something to not only prove to myself that I like should be working super hard, there's that weight that you're talking about.
Right.
I felt like I had to constantly prove it to other people that like I was working really hard, and I couldn't let anyone think I wasn't.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that 9 to 5 that almost alleviated the pressure.
Right.
You know, where it's like back when I had roommates, if I went to work 9 to 5 and then came home, people were like, you worked today, it's time to hang out. Fine.
Yes.
But if I like had a whole day to myself, even though they didn't mean it in a negative way, there would kind of be this like connotation of like misunderstanding or judgment of like, well, what are you doing today?
Right.
What have you done today? I don't understand.
Done?
Like
Yeah.
you weren't, it's like, and again, they're not intentionally being like, you suck, but like it became that like, well, it's not in a structure of a societal standard that I understand. So I don't think when do you work? And I'm
Right.
like, oh God, all the time?
All the time and none of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that, again, goes back to the other side of it for me is that I do like that structure because I don't think I work well with being able to, okay, sometimes I'm working at 10 p.m. and sometimes I'm working at, sometimes I'm working 5 days in a row straight, and then the next, 5 days I'm trying to figure out where my next job is coming in.
Yeah.
I also wanted to make sure that I had a day job, a 9 to 5, it's 8 to 5. But like I wanted to have one that I didn't have to take home with me. I don't have to, I'm not expected to answer emails in the evenings. I'm not expected to answer emails over the weekends. The job that I have now, I do travel some for my job. There are times when that, those hours are a little bit different, especially when I'm traveling and we have evening activities and things like that, or if I'm traveling and the travel goes into the weekend. But like for the most part, it's Monday through Friday. It's 8 to 5. I know that I can put that away.
Yeah.
And I like that structure. And that gives me the freedom to say, okay, yeah, that is the time that I'm working. And then the rest of the time is up for me to decide.
Yeah.
Whereas like if I also had to decide when I was working, I would feel like that's one more thing that I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Of course. Yeah. Because then it feels like, well, all the time is supposed to be the thing.
All
because
the time.
You got to find the next thing. And like that, a friend of mine recently helped me uncover, as she uncovered this about herself, the word hypervigilant is something that I don't know if I had heard before, but basically, like when she described it, I was like, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah.
And basically what it is like, I did this when I had roommates, and now that I live with my girlfriend, I also notice I do this when she's home, is if I'm just chilling, relaxing, and I'm like in like my home office, and maybe I'm just like watching a movie or YouTube or something in between working on things, and I'm just kind of hanging out. If she comes to the office, I get like, what am I doing? Why am I not productive? What the hell?
Yeah.
Out of this like weird, and she's never done a thing that's ever been, she's not actually judging me at all.
No.
She doesn't care what I'm doing. But there's this thing in my brain that has always been there. And I didn't realize how much it was there until I started living with somebody again. Because from 2020 to last summer, I lived on my own. I lived by myself. And so I didn't really realize, because I could do what I wanted all day. I didn't fear the strange judgment of anybody, right?
Yeah.
Even though they weren't doing anything to make me judge. But now I've got this like hypervigilance, I guess that it's called, where I'm like always trying to be aware of, do I seem busy right now? Because I don't want her to think I'm the lazy boyfriend who's like living at her house now, and hey, you just told me that these other 3 clients bailed on your last project. Why aren't you doing another? And again, she would never say that.
Right.
Nor would any of my past roommates. But like, it's that internal voice, that inner critic that's like.
So interesting. Do you think that, do you think that's conditioned in us? Like, is that societal? Is it generational? How old are you, can I ask?
I'm 32.
You're 32. Okay. Yeah. So I'm 40. Yeah. I feel like some of that is generational.
Yeah. And I've tried to like break that. I've tried to like trace it back to like, where did this come from? And usually my scapegoat, and I've talked about this plenty. Usually my scapegoat is honestly, I had a pretty terrible stepmom growing up.
Okay.
Until I was about 12. Okay. And usually I feel like most of my like issues, I'm like, oh, she made me feel that way. She ingrained that in my brain, right? Very mentally and emotionally abusive. And so normally that's my scapegoat. I'm like, she did this. But with this, I'm like, did she do this? Like, I don't know. Like, where does this come from? And I only say that.
I think a lot of it was like it's generational and societal, because I feel like it was like that in school. It was like if you're nodding off in class, you're and some of it was just like it's language that we had. Like I feel like so many people in our generation are fighting this idea of being lazy. Mm-hmm. So either we were told often that we were lazy, or that I don't know.
Oh,
I find this very common with like millennials.
Yeah.
This feeling of like, if we're not hustling, then we're failing.
And it's funny because like I can sit and say all of this now as still feelings I'm having, while simultaneously saying this is the most control I've ever had over these emotions.
Yeah.
Right? This is the most I've ever allowed myself to be comfortable, to be quote unquote lazy, to really figure out like, when am I most productive? When am I not? Like, giving myself all of that grace.
Yeah.
I can acknowledge all of those things, but I still can sit and be like, yeah, but I get real worried if someone thinks I haven't worked really hard for something.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, even back to our social media talk, I'm sure that that's not playing a good factor in any of this. For all the...
I've seen your social media. You look very busy.
Thank you. Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Please, everyone, think that. Like, and that's the thing is like that, it's we all see the highlights, and we all see, all the final results of what everyone's doing or what's coming up and all this sort of stuff. And like, of course, a lot of people do, I think it's becoming a little bit more normal to kind of share the behind the scenes of a lot of stuff and, all that sort of stuff. But, with us growing up with like the introduction and then evolution of social media and how it grew so quickly to become just like chaos.
Yes.
We're
so
sitting
fast.
and we're like, it's so easy to sit and be like, you see somebody going super viral on TikTok and then they start a business out of it and you're like, why can't I do that?
Right.
Why can't I
do that?
Film the thing or do the thing?
But that brings me back to the same point that I was having before, because I've had several people say like, well, why don't you post more? And then all it takes is one clip to go viral, and then you get all these followers, and then you get famous, and I still don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't, because like I say, okay, well, and then what? But what does the day-to-day look like for that person? Mm-hmm. All we see is, wow, this person has 8 million followers and they've got, these clips with thousands of views. And what we see is what they're putting into the algorithm to continue to stay there. And you don't know what the day-to-day looks like. And when I really think about that, I think if I was going to try to do that and try to push, like, how much time am I spending pushing out content, hoping that something catches? I mean, there are people who put one thing up and they strike gold.
Right.
Yeah. And then they find the right people that say, okay, here's how you can monetize that. Here's how you can make a life out of that. That's rare. Mm-hmm. It's not as rare to try to make it happen. Yeah. People who do put out the content and then they finally get something that catches, and then they get more and they get more. I mean, you had Simon Fraser on your podcast. He's a great example of that. He worked really, really hard and he grew those numbers. He's also just a nice guy and like he's personable, and so like he would meet people. He was traveling all over the place. Like not everybody has the time and the energy and the focus to do that.
Right.
Or the want to do that.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people see the thing and they want the thing, but they don't know what the rest of it looks like. And when I really look at what does the rest of that look like, I'm like, that's not what I want.
Yep, and that's the thing that I have to constantly remind myself of, right? And again, it's like I've got the best grasp on it now that I ever have, but it's still an active thing. Like I'll catch that thought popping up, where I see somebody share a thing and it's huge and they started a business out of it or whatever. And I'm like, man, why can't I? And then I'm like, wait, do I even want that?
I want that?
It's
yeah.
the classic like comparison is the thief of joy thing,
yeah.
right? Like that is so overstated because it's so true. And I've had to train myself to be like, no, don't. Why are you comparing? Like, I get it. We want that end result that somebody else had, the success, the whatever. But you're 100% correct. And like, well, we don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes.
No.
I think it's also actively becoming more of a prominent conversation of there's a lot of successful people that are openly saying, hey, it sucked. I didn't like doing that thing at all.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And now that I stopped doing it, or I stopped worrying about being famous or making all the content or trying to be popular, whatever, now I'm the happiest I've ever been. And so it's like...
And is that success then?
Right.
Right. Is it really success if you're not happy?
Yep. And that's why, even going back to your earlier statement of like, you having the clarity of right now what success looks like to you.
Yeah.
I feel like that is one of the most valuable things.
Thank you.
That like
it's taken a long time to get here.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course.
And I still battle with it. I
yes.
do, because there are times when kind of where I'm sitting with comedy right now is that I'm in a very fortunate position where I am in regular rotation at the Columbus Funny Bone for hosting and featuring. So I don't know off the top of my head about how many weekends I had last year, but somewhere between 7 and 10 weekends of either hosting or featuring, and then I get one nights and stuff like that too. I'm very fortunate to have that. A lot of comics work hard to get into that position, and it used to be when I started that you went from hosting to featuring to headlining. That's not true anymore. To become a headliner, you don't really need to go through those steps. You have to get those numbers on social media.
Yeah, right.
So I tell people, I'm like, because they're like, well, how did you get what you're doing? And I said, well, first of all, what do you want? Because if you want a headline, you're not looking at the same things to get to where I'm at than if you want a headline. If you want to be hosting and featuring, you look at writing clean. You treat the job professionally. You show up on time. You answer emails. It's a lot of it is not necessarily what you're doing on stage, but it's how you present yourself. You don't get drunk at the bar. You don't hit on the bartenders. You act professionally, like this is a job. Yeah. And I shouldn't have to tell people that, but I do.
Right. Yeah.
But it's writing clean and it's filling a niche. Mm-hmm. A lot of comics now are asking for specific kind of openers. And I'm very lucky that people are asking for female openers. I think there's been a big push to have more diversity on shows. So you have some of these white male headliners that know they want to have a diverse show. So they're asking for openers that aren't the same as them. Yep. So I'm in that lucky position where when they ask for female headliner or female openers, that the club will say, hey, they're looking for a clean. So being able to work clean is huge, mm-hmm. because a lot of times they're asking for clean, even if the headliner's not clean. They don't want the openers to be dirtier than they are.
Yeah, yeah.
They want to build in the show,
right.
Which makes sense.
Yep.
So, and then I also can work queer. So I'm bisexual, and so I have like another set that I do that is much more geared towards that. So if they say, okay, we've got a queer headliner coming in and they're looking for queer friendly openers, mm-hmm. I also fill that bucket.
Yeah.
So I tell people, if you're trying to open, try to fill a specific bucket. Mm-hmm. If you can fill more than one, that's great. Work clean, act professional. That's about it. If you're trying to headline, I gotta know. right. Go ask somebody else, because I'm not trying to. Not that I wouldn't want a headline. I do like the idea. I have kind of a different bucket list for myself in terms of what I shouldn't say bucket list, but a goal list for mm-hmm. things that I want to do still with my comedy career. I've never recorded an album. I've never recorded a special. I would like to do that. But again, I'm doing those things because I want to do that thing, not because I think that's going to lead to this imaginary whatever it is that tells me I'm the best. And I don't know. Like
that, that, self-definition of success, everything that you're explaining of like, I want to do the thing, not necessarily for the result of this, more so because I just want to do the thing.
I want to do the thing. Yeah.
That has been so much of like where personally, like my head has landed in the last couple of years of, again, like gaining more clarity and just like figuring out who I am as a person and the things I want. Like you even saying, the term bucket list, like if anybody's listening to the show right now who's an avid listener, I bring up a bucket list probably every single episode.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm big on like a goals list, a bucket list.
Yeah.
From big to small things, right?
Right.
Because I think there's so much value in just list out the things that you want to achieve or that you want to experience, because ultimately, like, my definition of success is just kind of like having a life that is filled with joy and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Like, and again, that came from years of grind mentality and oh my God, I got to hustle and I got to find clients. And listen, I'm still a self-employed person who, in today's world where no one has any money, it's real difficult to get somebody to hire you to take photos or film a video or design something, right? It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's probably right now harder than it has been for 10 years.
Yeah.
So
now you're fighting with AI too.
Yeah, right, exactly. And everyone's like, just AI it. It's like, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like that, while all those things are happening, I also have to do the work to identify like, okay, like, yes, I got to put in some extra work. I do need the clients. I do need that money. I still have to figure out from a work standpoint, how can I find that success, that normal definition of success, right? Oh, you're paying your bills and you're staying alive. Okay. But also, I had to do a lot of work of identifying that, like, I wasn't paying enough attention to me, essentially.
Right.
It was the results that I was looking for.
Yeah.
But things like, words like fulfillment and joy were stuff that were kind of on way in the back seat. Where in the last couple of years, I've made those just about number one. Obviously there's some times where you got to be a little bit desperate, and I'm like, no, number one right now is client acquisition. I got to find some new people to pay me 100%. But not tossing that in trade of, the fulfillment thing will go to the back. So, like keeping that, like trying to find a harmony amongst those things.
Yes, it's balance. I mean, I think like the 9 to 5 equivalent is people who work for retirement.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're just doing your job so that you can have enough money to retire, what are you doing? You have to enjoy the time that you have now. Mm-hmm. That's another thing too, is that I legitimately love my day job. I like the people that I work with. I like the people I work for. I like it, and I that's so much more important, because some people say, oh, well, you could make more money if you do this. I don't want to. Money is important, don't get me wrong. The money and the benefits that I get from my job are great. Could I be making more somewhere else? I was. Mm-hmm. I had a job where I was making more than I'm making now. I mean, it's, timing and inflation and stuff, but like comparatively, in that time period, I was making the most that I'd ever made hourly, and I was miserable. I did not like the people I worked for. The benefits were fantastic. They paid 100% of my like health insurance and everything. Like it was amazing. It was on paper a great job, but I felt so much anxiety going into work. I would get home and feel lousy about myself. The people that I worked for were mean. It was a greedy industry. I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. I'm working now. It's a not-for-profit company, but we have great benefits. We have good pay. I love the people. Like, I've made genuine friends there, and that to me is so much more important, because like, you don't know if you're gonna die before you hit your retirement.
Right.
And you don't know if you're gonna die before you hit that whatever that success is. Mm-hmm. So all of these people like in comedy who are like trying to get to the next thing, enjoy the thing that you're in now. And I see that with comics who are doing open mics, and they're like, they go from one to the next to the next. Try just to go to one in a night. Watch the other comics. Talk to people. Have a good time. Don't just say like, oh, I gotta get that rush of being on stage, and they'll hit 3 open mics in a night, and then they'll go home, and it's like, well, did you really work on your material? Do you remember what you said up there? Did you just need that dopamine hit? Did you talk to anybody? Did anybody see you? Did you remember anything? Like,
it's the come down off that high too.
Yeah.
Oh, I had such a busy night doing this thing, or had such a fun time on this set, or whatever, the equivalent is. But then it's like the come down of, if you don't have the scale or whatever balanced a little bit, again, if everything is super high, then super low, then super high, like, then you're feeling the inconsistency. That becomes a heavier battle, in my personal opinion. Right. Been there, right?
Be present in what you're doing. Allow yourself to be bored.
Right. Yes. That has been a hard thing for me to figure out. But like in those moments where I am like, I'll just be bored a little bit. I'm like, it's not too bad. Just kind of sitting around. And again, like it's everything you're saying, like being more present in experiencing what you're doing, to find that joy, to figure out how does this thing fulfill me. And of course, there's zero wrong with anybody having major goals and their idea of success and
absolutely
wanting to chase these things.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that at all. Like, chase your dreams, but enjoy the ride.
Exactly. And that's another cliche statement that I feel like a lot of people are identifying as like, oh, that's being stated everywhere all the time, because it's really true. And it's a thing that we need to remind ourselves of. And I'm not perfect at that. I never have been. But again, I've been trying to live life more in that way as much as I can in the last few years, where yes, I can sit and identify there's moments in time where I'm like, man, I need some more clients. I need some more freelance work.
Yeah.
But also, you know, this comedy show's coming up and I just want to go experience it and have fun. Or this thing is happening and I do just want to go and check this item off my bucket list just to say that I did it. And like, ever since I've made that a more prominent thing to focus on in my life, like I can genuinely say I'm happier. Doesn't mean all my problems are solved. Doesn't mean that there's not hard work that I don't want to do that I still have to do. But like, again, it's taking that line on the scale and taking it from drastic ups and drastic downs to a little less. Those humps are smaller, right? To where it's like there's still going to be the ups, still going to be the downs, but it's not as drastic between them. To where it's like, oh, there's a little bit more balance here, to where I'm, you know, literally actively right now, I've got a lot of annoying problems with freelance clients. Because like I said, people just don't want to pay for anything right now.
Yeah, they don't.
So I can openly identify, hey, it's hard and it's real difficult and real annoying. But I can at the same time identify that everything and that weight in my life would feel 10 times worse if I wasn't being present on what other things bring me joy.
Yeah.
Not only banking on I'm not successful if I don't have all these clients perfectly figured out or $1 million in my bank account. It's like, hey, no, what else can we be doing? What's a fun thing on your joy list, on your bucket list that you want to experience, or a community that you can be a part of, or a fun conversation you can have with somebody? Like identifying the positive weight that those things can carry, the positive energy that those things can bring in. Like focusing on those things, even in the smallest way, have changed a lot for me.
And you know, life, like you said, life is hard. Mm-hmm. There's going to be ups and downs. Not everything is going to be fun. And I do think work should be enjoyable.
Ideally,
but it's not always going to be.
Yep.
And I think remembering also that like emotions are temporary, all of them, good and bad. I was telling my son about this, you know, because there's times when he's like, oh, I'm sad, and he just has this feeling like it's never going to end. Or he's like, I can't remember anything good. And I'm like, well, that's because you don't feel good right now. Mm-hmm. And when you do feel good, sometimes it's hard to remember not feeling good. And I think this idea of like, are you happy? Like, are you happy with your life? Happiness comes and goes. Like, all the emotions are temporary. So you got to kind of look at like, how am I happy more often than I am this or that? But you can't strive to just be happy all the time. That's not realistic. Yeah. And you're not going to feel happy if you're happy all the time, because you got to have those highs and lows to balance it out.
That's the way that I often explain it is, you know, if we were looking at life kind of like a video game, right? Mm-hmm. Silly analogy, but like
no, not silly.
The difficulty setting of this video game is extremely difficult. Like I feel like, and again, even I can sit and be like, I think I'm a positive person and I think positively, blah, blah, blah. I can still identify the difficulty setting of life is set on hard.
Yeah.
So what I try to consciously do as much as I can, and whenever I can take control of it, I want to do things that do not make my life harder. Yeah. Because at its default setting, difficult. Super difficult. There's all these problems, all this stuff that's out of our control, all these things. So what are things that I can control, or what are some positive things I can invoke to not make it harder on myself, to not beat myself up more over, you know, not, you know, failing at this thing or not succeeding or, you know, comparing myself to this or letting this situation get out of control, or, you know, the probably millions of examples we could dig into, just simplifying it into, for me personally, the way that I describe it is like, life is already hard. I don't want to make it harder for myself.
Yeah.
Because just like you said, there's going to be those moments of vast happiness where it's like, oh my God, greatest day ever. This is incredible. Everything worked. Next week, something terrible could happen to where it's like, oh my God, I didn't know what I had last week. You know, I was riding high last week and now I've got this. Oh my God. And it's like, that's always going to happen. The happiness is always going to come and go, just like the sadness and the difficult times is always going to come and go. Some of it sticks around a little longer and is harder to get rid of or to live with or whatever. But again, like, that's why, and I'm not perfect at it at all, but like, that's why as much as humanly possible, I'm like, what are things I want to do? What's a life that I want to live? And then where am I setting that bar? What does that experience look like for me? Yeah. Like, even in the terms of like the bucket list thing, like, again, I've become so big on that idea, and not so much of the idea of like the death part of it, but more so just like, what are things I want to experience in my life?
Yeah.
What would I want to do before I die?
Yeah.
And looking at those things big to small of, okay, what does this experience really mean to me? Like a story that I've shared multiple times, but it's always my go-to, and I'll make it short as possible, is like, over a year ago or so, I put on my bucket list, amongst the many things, I put be an honorary Ghostbuster for a day. Super random, right?
Yeah.
But I love the Ghostbusters, and I was like, I don't know what this even means, but like, it would just be fun to be a quote-unquote Ghostbuster for a day. No clue what that actually means. Long story short, I meet another filmmaker who's a part of the Ohio Ghostbusters. He's like actually in the group. They go and they do all these appearances and all this sort of stuff as the Ghostbusters. He and I have a conversation. He mentions this. I tell him like, yeah, dude, like, it's actually on my bucket list to be a Ghostbuster. He immediately is like, let's do it. Yeah. So he then sets me up with the suit, gets me a custom patch, all this sort of stuff, and invites me to one of the Columbus location movie premieres of like the new Ghostbusters movie that came out last year. And he's like, come with us. You're going to come do the appearance with us.
Amazing.
And like for a few hours that day, I was decked out as a Ghostbuster, meeting and greeting these like kids and families, taking photos with them. And like, this is a direct example of like, where do you set that bar? Right. Because like in that moment, to those kids, to those families, they're meeting a Ghostbuster. Obviously not the adults, but you know, the kids more so.
Yeah.
They met a Ghostbuster and got a photo with a Ghostbuster because they just went and watched the movie and oh my God, they're here.
Yes.
So for me, I'm a Ghostbuster, right?
Yep.
Now, yeah, sure, I'm not in the movies, I'm not the thing, but that's not where my, no.
And you're not busting actual ghosts.
No,
you know,
exactly,
yeah, right.
Exactly.
Well,
so it's
yeah, and what checks that off the list for you? Like when you have that list, what checks that off the list for you? Because similar that like when I was growing up, I loved game shows, and I always wanted to be a game show host, and I had this like a dream that I would like someday host like Hollywood Squares or Match Game or something like that. I just wanted to be a game show host. And again, talking about Eric Tate and I did that trivia show together, the Quiz Box. Like to me, like I did it.
Yep.
I was a game show host. Like I mean, that it was a game show. Like we had contestants, we had audience, we gave away prizes. Like that to me, that checks that off that list. Like it was something that I always dreamed of doing, and I did it. Like sure, small scale, but for those people in that audience, I was a co-host of a game show.
1,000,000%.
You know?
That is exactly what it is. And so it's where do you set that bar? What makes you check that off that list?
Right.
And again, that for me in the same way, it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna set the parameters on this of like it has to be the most perfect thing. I'm on TV. I'm blah blah blah.
Right.
No, it's.
If you had maybe put that costume on at home and just been a Ghostbuster at home, that might not have checked it off enough for you.
Right. That experience.
That's okay. Like it's okay for you to say like what checks this off for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's like so important for like us all to be able to identify those things. It's so much of what we've been talking about this entire conversation. Like, what does success actually look like to you? And finding that clarity and figuring out where that figurative bar is actually set of, well, what does achieving this goal actually look like to me? I know what it's projected as. I know what I'm seeing other people do similar things as, but do I actually want what they have? or what does it really look like to me? You hosting a show. Yep, you hosted a game show.
Yeah.
You did it. There it was.
I know.
Checked off the list. The experience was had. Amazing. And it's like,
and I wouldn't have had that opportunity without Eric, because Eric, it was his show. He was doing that show before I joined him. We made it something bigger than it was together, but like he really, you know, brought me on as an equal partner, and like we were co-hosts of the show together, and it's one of those things I'm like, oh, if I could do that again, I would do it again. It was always a lot of work, but it was always so rewarding.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, it's just like identifying, again, what does the win really look like to you? Like for me, like becoming more involved in the comedy scene here in Columbus, like that door was open because I started my own comedy podcast. Like I produce another show that is like half a game show, half a fake podcast. That is it's an improvised podcast, right?
Yeah.
And that was just because I was like, I love improv comedy. I have no idea how to do it otherwise. I have this idea for a show and the means to do it. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
But then what that domino affected into was then people being like, you have that show. You're an improv comedian. And I'm like, I am.
Am I? Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you do it. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. Like,
yeah.
And again, then that leads to, you know, becoming, you know, friends with so many other comedians and all this sort of stuff, to where now, you know, there's been an active kind of group of us that get together like once a month just for like a little comedy meetup, just to kind of like run through different improv games and just like kind of just hang out and just do fun stuff, right? Now for other people, they're like, oh yeah, I'm coming here to kind of keep the skills sharp and to try new things. And I'm like, every time we do this, I live a dream. You know?
Yeah.
It's just the idea of like the fact that I even get to say that even remotely actively, I get to do some form of improv comedy. That to me, I'm like, yep, 9-year-old me who's sitting and watching Whose Line every single night wouldn't believe that I'm doing any of that.
It's the Mike Wazowski outlook on life. And I say that because, like, if you've seen Monsters, Inc., at the very beginning, he's like all excited because they're going to be on a commercial. And then they show them on the commercial, and there's text over the screen of like where Mike Wazowski's like, there's like a box, right? And or I can't remember which one is which. Like there's one at the beginning, one at the end. And one like he's on a magazine, and there's like a sticker over the magazine. I think the one on TV is at the beginning. But the commercial is over, and you can see like the Sully character like, oh man, I'm so sorry, Mike. Like felt bad for him because like his face was covered. And Mike just goes, I was on TV, and like calls his mom, and he's like, oh, like, and it's just like, that's the outlook that I want to have. It's hard. It's hard to not want more.
Yeah.
It's hard to you know, to say like, well, or is that enough? Like if I record a comedy special and I put it online myself, does that count, or does it have to be Hulu? Does it have to be Netflix? Does it have to be what? And the people I think that say like, well, I didn't really do it because it wasn't a Netflix special, or I just put it out myself, or not enough people saw it. No, you still did it.
Yep. That 100%. And I forgot about that from Monsters, Inc., but I'm like, oh my God, yeah, that's how I want to.
Yeah.
And again, just like you said, like I'm going to keep giving the caveat of all this stuff we're talking about. Like it is hard. It's difficult to not be like, well, yeah, but what about, I want to do this.
And again,
though.
it's
like,
okay to want more.
Yeah.
It is okay to want more. And it's okay to not necessarily be happy with all of the things that you do. Like I remember I was on a magazine cover back in, oh gosh, I don't remember what year it was, but I got an interview to be in this magazine. It was like a local magazine, a small like art thing. I don't think it exists anymore. And I was super excited about it, and then I went to go pick up my first copy of it, and I hadn't seen the photo that they had picked, and the photo they picked was not attractive.
Okay.
And like, I asked other people. It wasn't just me being like, oh, I don't like, you know, the way my hair looks. I asked people, and they're like, that is really not a flattering photo. Like it was. I don't. There's an episode of Sex and the City where like Carrie Bradshaw like sees herself on the cover of New York magazine, and she's like smoking a cigarette with no makeup on. And they had like kind of tricked her at this photo shoot where they were like, oh, we're just gonna take some test shots, and then like they used that instead of like once. And so that was kind of how I felt, where I was like, oh my God, there's this magazine cover, and I look terrible. And I remember like taking the entire stack wherever I was so that like nobody else could see it because I was mortified. those moments are still going to happen.
Yes.
That's not my Mike Wazowski moment. That's my
Right.
moment of being like, okay, this is legitimately embarrassing.
Right.
So yeah, those things are going to happen, but then being able to take the other times when it's not, maybe not the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst thing. It's still something great. And being able to see what you have that's great, even if it's not, you can't be getting 7 million followers and saying, well, I don't have 8 or I don't have 9 or I don't,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the goalpost moving.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are also guilty of that. Like, definitely been there, have to catch myself on that still, but it's like we accomplished the thing, and instead of being like, we scored, we did it, a lot of people are like, no, and then you move the goalpost, and it's like, no, that wasn't good enough. Well, that's not what I meant, actually. I wanted it to be this, or it needs to be even better. And it's like, I have had conversation with people sometimes where it's a lot fewer and further between, but like, there's a couple people who have been like, yeah, I'm not the celebration kind of person. Like, I just, once I get there, I'm just looking for the next thing. And I'm like, totally fine. Do your thing, whatever. But like, I am like, man, but like, what would happen if you just accepted it a little bit? If you were just in that moment and just like, hey, I did the thing. I don't have to stay here, because I do think there's something dangerous with that line of like, are you being too content and not, growing or, challenging yourself or helping yourself get better or whatever?
Yeah, being content and being complacent.
Yes, complacent is the thing.
Right.
And so it's like, there's always that fine line. But at the same time, I'm also just like, take it in a little bit, though.
Right.
Like enjoy it at least a little bit. That's the enjoying the process thing that we talked about. Like, at least celebrate the fact that you achieved that thing while actively preparing for the next thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating anything necessarily too small.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like people who judge people for liking things, I mean, it's Super Bowl Sunday, and you've got people out here who are like really excited about the Super Bowl, and then you've got these other people who are like, sports ball. Right. I'm sorry, I'm not a sports person, but I am not a sports ball person either.
Yeah.
Let people like it.
Yes.
Just let them like it.
Yep.
If they like it, they like it, And it's the same thing with like people who get excited about something that's nerdy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What do you care if it's not hurting anybody?
Yep.
If it makes you happy and it doesn't hurt anybody else, there's nothing wrong with it. That's one of the things that I've tried to teach my son. I was like, you can believe whatever you want to believe as long as it doesn't hurt anybody and it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
You're allowed to believe that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That balance of, for some reason, that is so hard for a lot of people, and I don't really know why. And again, this is a whole other conversation on its own, but like, I'm the exact same way. Like, I forgot that the Super Bowl was tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not really a sports person really at all.
I don't know who's playing. I'm not gonna. I think Taylor Swift is playing. I don't know. I think there's a Taylor Swift involved, but I don't know anything beyond that.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I sound like a sports ball person now. I swear to God, I'm not. If you would like the Super Bowl,
that's so good.
You enjoy it. It's because not for me.
But I'm the exact same way where I'm like, yeah, just okay, fine. Be stoked about it. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. Like, because there's plenty of other weird things that I love that other people are going to be like, what the hell?
Right.
Like my thing, like, I love pro wrestling.
I do too.
Do you really?
I love it. I'm kind of out of it right now. I have not been keeping up as much, but bucket list for me is a Royal Rumble. I would rather go to a Royal Rumble than I would to a WrestleMania.
Really?
I just love it. It's just the excitement of somebody new coming out and people getting thrown over, and you just never know who's next. It's like everybody.
I am positive we just became the absolute best of friends. 100%.
Yeah.
Finding anybody else who's like, I like wrestling, I'm like, oh,
I do.
My God.
And it was going to the live events that made me love it.
Yeah. So was that a thing growing up? Did you get to
No,
or was
not really. I would kind of see it on TV, but I wasn't that in. I mean, I was into it, but it was not for girls,
Right.
Now it is more so.
Yeah.
They
very
have.
much.
Yeah. I mean, when we were kids, there weren't nearly as many divas as there are now.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And they were. Yeah. It was bra and panty matches, and now they're actually just athletes who go in and beat the hell out of each other, and it's cool, and everyone's
great.
like, hey, this is rad.
It's awesome.
I've been doing this the whole time.
Right.
Like,
yeah. But it was going to the live shows because you get that energy from the crowd, and it's an entirely different experience than watching on TV. And I feel that way about almost any sporting event. Like I will not sit down and watch a baseball game on TV. I'm bored. I will go to a baseball game. I
Same,
love
yeah.
going to a baseball game.
Yep.
And it was like that for me with pro wrestling, but more so that I was like, well, now I want to follow what's happening. Now I got to watch the soap opera now that I've been there. So
The
yeah,
theater
so then
part of it
right, so then you keep up with it more.
Yep.
I've fallen off in recent years just being a mom and being busy and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's been a long time since I've been to a live event.
Well,
but
you just missed this year's Royal Rumble. It happened
I know.
last weekend or the weekend before.
I was in Indianapolis too.
Really?
With my son visiting my sister.
Wow.
And everyone was like, "Are you going for the Royal Rumble?" I was like, "I wish." I was like,
like,
"I'm
"Oh."
watching a different Royal Rumble between 3 cousins."
yeah, I'm watching the Rumble. Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
watching
It's right over here. I don't know who's going to WrestleMania this year, but it's a
I
crazy
think it's Baby
battle.
Harper.
Yeah, we'll see. They're like, what?
Yeah.
That is incredible. And
Yeah.
so something that maybe you'll relate to, maybe I don't know, but like, growing up for me, like when I fell in love with pro wrestling, I can honestly attribute a lot of my outlook on storytelling and branding and character development and like the way that I look at a lot of things, I relate it to pro wrestling.
Yeah.
There are so many different ideas that I've taken from pro wrestling that I'm like, how can I do my own version of that thing?
Yeah.
Like, how can I'm going to take this over here and I'm going to do that. Or this is kind of inspired by this character. So I'm going to kind of take that for myself and put it into like this brand that I'm doing or whatever. And like, it has been a constant in my life since I was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, something
Interesting.
like that. And
yeah. It was a later thing for me. I was probably
Gotcha.
like teens, early 20s. Yeah.
why? See, because that's the time I feel like when everyone's like, it's not cool to, why are you watching pro wrestling? And then
I went to my first Raw and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
that is incredible.
Yeah.
Because that I feel like is the path that everyone follows. Is like, you're a fan when you're a kid, and when you're a teenager, people are like, you like wrestling? And then you're like, no. And then and then later in adulthood, you're like, yeah, I like this thing because I can make my own rules now, and I can watch whatever I want to watch.
You can cheer for whoever you want to, whether it's a good guy or the bad guy.
Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, even as silly as that is, like, that was another thing that I had to learn to own as an adult. Like, because I never stopped being a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
But I would kind of be like the closeted wrestling fan.
Got it.
Where like if someone found out, I'd be like, oh yeah, like I like it. What do you think of it though? Like, and then at some point I was like, no, yep, love it, and I'm gonna talk about it all the time. And then you find out people are like, oh, that's cool. I actually also watch it. I just never talk about it. There's like that thing where you find out that everybody knows what it is and kind of watches it, but for some reason was just hiding it for a super long time. Like,
yeah, I like to think that we're also changing a little bit more in that way, just as a society, and that maybe the pandemic time kind of broke some of that as well, of like, being ashamed of what we are into. But it still does happen where people are like, oh, you like that? I mean, I experience that sometimes at, even at my day job where I'm like,
yeah,
because they, if they're sports fans, I'm like, well, actually, I like this art thing instead, and they're like, oh,
they're like, huh?
Cool.
Where's the ball at?
I don't know.
Where are the points being
I can't think of
scored?
anything specific right now, but yeah.
But I mean, you said that earlier though. It's like just letting people like what they like, and that's just sort of the thing. And letting people, again, whether it's a life experience or something entertainment wise that they enjoy, it's like just let yourself experience the thing.
Yeah.
Like that is just it. For years, I would never share anything on social about wrestling.
Really?
I just wouldn't. So I was like, I just don't know what conversations is going to. There was just that weird thing. I don't know.
That's so funny. I have a picture of myself like pregnant in a John Cena t-shirt.
That's so good.
Yeah.
It for some reason took me a minute to own it. And now all the time I'm like, this is incredible. And then I find out half the people that follow me are like, I also think it's incredible. I'm like, yes, we're all in this together.
Yeah,
like
and people are going to be like, oh, it's fake.
And I'm like, do you think that in 2025 we all don't know what's going? Like, The Undertaker has a podcast. Like, we know he's not a dead wizard. Like, it's
not fake though. It's scripted.
it's also,
they're still getting thrown.
Exactly.
They still have to be strong. Like, this is a real thing. This is an AI.
A difference between fake and predetermined. Like, big difference there.
Yes, this is theater.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like the craziest form of theater.
It
and
is.
Like,
it's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why it's like when I look at like probably my 3 biggest fandoms throughout life: pro wrestling, improv comedy, and horror movies.
Interesting.
Those are like the 3. Like if someone's concocting me up in a lab, those are the 3 main things.
I can get behind two out of 3 of those. I
Is
do
it
not
the
do
horror
horror.
movies
I
of it?
don't.
Nope.
No.
Yep.
No. I get too scared.
That was also somehow a thing that like as a little kid, I don't know how my parents had it happen. I don't know, but from a small age, I was
it's
like...
It's so interesting you say that. You said how your parents had that happen. I, for the longest time, before I had my son, believed everything was nurture over nature. Mm-hmm. And now having a child, so much of who we are is just nature. It's crazy.
Interesting.
I did not believe it. And even like as I was pregnant, I was like talking to another mom and she's like, oh, some of that stuff's just in their nature. And I was like, nah, you can mold a person into anything. And I mean, you can.
Right.
But there are certain things that like my son just naturally gravitated towards that like neither of us had anything to do with it. At least if there was kind of any subconscious thing. I mean, you see it in twins too, or like parents who have 2 kids. Some things it's just, you may have just naturally been drawn towards that. Yeah,
and that's because I try to think about that sometimes too and trace it back. Because like people will be like, what's the first horror movie you ever loved? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't remember the first time that I watched anything. I only have memories of my parents, for some reason, were chill with like every Friday they would take me to the video store and we would rent a couple videos, like probably 1 or 2 wrestling pay-per-views and then 1 or 2 horror movies, and that was like the weekend. And
I used to love going to the video store.
It was so much fun.
Look at all of the.
It's so funny now when I see like cover art for like a horror movie pop up or anything pop up, and my memory of that cover art is from the video store.
Yes.
It's not in like, I never see it in any other circumstance, but I'm like, oh, I remember looking at that one all the time at the video store, like on the rack.
So did you grow up here?
I grew up in a really small town about an hour and a half away from here.
Was it like your video store, was it a Blockbuster? Was it like a...
Off-brand video store.
Okay,
it was
those
like
are the best.
What was it called? I'm not going to waste airtime here of quietly debating what the name was. I don't remember.
There was a place in Clintonville. So I grew up here, and there was a place in Clintonville that was like one of these really cool, looked like a house that had been converted, and it was like a video store, or place where you could rent videos and you could buy memorabilia and stuff. That place was so cool. And like I think of the same thing too sometimes, where I think of all the covers.
Yep.
And my dad used to take us there, and I would rent best ofs of Saturday Night Live hosts. So I would get like best of John Belushi or best of Steve Martin, or like those were the things that I always wanted to watch. I was like wanted to watch old SNL.
Now, I absolutely cannot, we cannot finish a podcast without me asking this question. Like, when does comedy become a thing that you're a fan of? Like, when does that pop up in your life?
It's the earliest I can remember was loving John Belushi.
Okay.
And he was like the SNL cast member that I loved the most. I loved the Blues Brothers. I loved the cheeseburger, like all of the things that like he did. And I would watch him over and over, and his facial expressions and his subtleties and his shouting and all of it. I just loved him. I thought he was so funny. And again, I think some of it's just nature. Like it was in my nature to want to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. And I was just drawn towards that.
And so that was just the thing that kind of just stuck with you, like, as you
kind
grew
of
up?
Throughout,
like,
Steve Martin was another one. He was a big inspiration for me. I loved Gilda Radner. I just always, I feel like I fail the female comedian community when most of my heroes were men. But I mean, I think at the time I loved Eddie Murphy too. He was one of the best SNL cast members of all time. And SNL was kind of always my dream. And even now when I watch it, I still dream about like, oh, I would love to be on that.
Yeah.
And then again, I think, what does that really look like?
Like what do I really need to do to get there? And then what's the actual performing on the show actually look like or feel like?
But I still watch it and I dream about being in that cast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was and you might have shared this earlier, but it was long enough ago that I have now forgotten. What was the trajectory of you deciding, as you're growing up, cool, we're in adult world now and we can decide what we want to do. I'm going to go ahead and start doing some stand-up comedy.
I don't know. I think I kind of always wanted to. And then I was in college and we had a solo performance writing class. And what I wrote, the teacher said, well, you should try this as stand-up comedy. And I was like, I've always really wanted to do that anyway. There was an open stage night, so I signed up for open stage. And so it was not just comedy. There was an improv group that closed it out, but I was the only stand-up. So it was like poetry readings or mostly like acoustic, musicians and stuff like that. So like people were ready to laugh. So I killed.
Now you're like, oh my God,
I'm hilarious.
Yeah, who knows
Between
SNL? I'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah. But it was like, yeah, they were ready to laugh. And then I was like, okay, well, now I'll try like a real comedy open mic. And it was a very different experience.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And then I didn't do much of it then after that. And then when I moved back home, I left school. So I had struggled a lot when at the end of school. I dropped out of school. I had problems with drugs and alcohol and mental health and everything. And I came home and I did like a mental health facility and I got myself well. And then I was like, well, now I want to try doing stand-up again. Because I thought about all of the things, like what was it that I was working on before and can I continue to do some of that?
Yeah.
So I went to school for acting and I always wanted to, be an actress. I wanted to be on SNL. Like I thought like that was my path.
Yeah.
I did really well when we had the comedy semester, like in acting. So I did well in that.
Okay.
And yeah, I think I just always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And then, life has its roadblocks and its ups and downs. And when I got through a lot of that, I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? And I looked into Shadowbox, where I ended up working for a while. But before that, I thought, well, I'll sign up for the contest at the Funny Bone. And the very first time that I did stand up here in Columbus was in the contest at the Funny Bone.
Okay.
Yeah, and I made it all the way to the finals.
Did you? And I, apologies if I'm like jumping the timeline a lot here, but like, have you ever had that moment during comedy career where that burnout really did hit, or life was just lifing away, and like you were actively doing stand up? And maybe the version of success might have looked different at that time, or you really wanted to get that special, or we still at SNL in the sites.
Yeah.
Was there ever that, like, have you had that moment you were like, why am I doing any of that?
Yeah.
I have to stop. I cannot, like, there's no point. And I know you said like
right
pandemic
before the pandemic.
Like,
yeah, right before that. Because I had burned out. I was, it was, trying to juggle motherhood and trying to make it happen. And then like the Me Too movement also really was difficult, because it was a really great thing for comedy, but it was a hard thing to navigate, because then it was like there was a lot of push for safe spaces and women working with women, and it was like it just was a very heightened time emotionally, and there was kind of a lot of fear around like what male comedians are safe, and how do we create safe spaces, and who do we allow in our spaces, and who are we helping to bring up, and it just was like it was super tense for me, especially at a time when I was kind of the face of a space. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't bringing anybody that was seen as problematic or dangerous or whatever. And a combination between that and becoming a mom and not knowing what I wanted to do personally, because I ended up spending so much time focusing on the space that I'd be hosting a stand-up night and I'd be like, okay, are all the comics here? Do we, making sure everybody has what they need, and who's doing how much time, and am I lighting, and then I would go, oh, I'm hosting the show. Oh, I guess I better write out a set list. And it was like my actual comedy, my stuff was coming last.
Yeah.
So even though I was doing it, it was like I was still putting myself last.
Yep. That is for sure understandable. Like that, because yes, you're so focused on everything else in the presentation, helping everybody else and all that sort of stuff.
When you're producing, like your own part of it gets pushed down. Yeah.
If we're going to play pretend here for a second. Like if you could go back in time to some point in your life, whether it's with comedy, whether it's with whatever, and talk to that version of you. And I'm not talking butterfly effect stuff here. We're not talking like you go back and you give some advice and it changes.
I've seen Doctor Who and time rates happen.
Yeah, no, those things, we're not leaning into that. But just like that person, or if you were talking to somebody who is at a point in their life that is similar to where you were, and you're going back and you're sharing something with them based off of all that you know now, where are you going and what are you sharing?
I always say I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't.
Yep.
I don't think I would change anything.
Yep.
I don't know.
What even based off of that, like, what do you feel like maybe the biggest personal lesson you've learned throughout this entire journey has been? Has it been the, success is self-defined? Has it been self-confidence or something else that we haven't even, touched on?
I don't know. That's tough. It's not any one thing, I think. I think for me, the biggest thing for me is that life is not black and white. It's all the things in between. And I think so many people focus on this or that. And it's not this or that. It's this and that, or some of this, many of this, a little bit of this. Like, it's even in our personal relationships with, like, when people argue, they want to figure out who's right and who's wrong. And sometimes you're both right, sometimes you're both wrong, and sometimes you're both a little bit right or a little bit wrong, and it's finding that middle ground and finding that middle path and being okay with not just okay with the middle path, but like letting that middle path serve you, I've struggled a lot with that things are either great or they're terrible, and like letting things just be okay and having that be enough. Yep. Like, I know that sounds like real, like,
no, this is, and I know
maybe I don't mean to sound depressing. I
don't think it does at all. And I know I've said this about 100 times in this episode, but I could not agree more, because that is another like part of a mindset shift that I went through, of identifying I, again, 1,000,000% agree that like things are not always just this or just that. And I feel like that is a thing that I bring up actively in conversations, even relating it to something as silly as client work, right?
Yeah.
When I'm talking to a client and they're like, can we work together? Can we shoot a video? And they tell me their idea and I'm like, well, cool, that's going to cost this much and we'll do this type of production and it's pretty big, right? Everyone's go-to is, oh, well, it can't be this. Well, then it must be that then, which in that is nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not all or nothing. The same way that we're looking at our goals. The goals are not all or nothing. There's always something in between. So while maybe the client thing, maybe it's a silly example, but like, that's like, I have that conversation all the time where I'm like, let's slow it down. And like, no, just because we talked about this doesn't mean it's either a yes or an absolute no.
Right.
Where can we find that's a kind of a collection of the things, the gray in the middle, where everything kind of tends to land?
Right.
So I think that is absolutely an accurate description of the way that so many things are. It's not 100% perfect. It's not 100% terrible. Some things are better than others or worse than others. But usually everything is that weird kind of middle ground that's gray. And it's like, you're not 100% right or 100% wrong, because there's different perspectives and understandings and all this sort of stuff. And outside of like genuinely doing something shitty and hurting somebody, like, then you're wrong. But it's like, most things are like, it lands in that gray.
And people.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know if I believe in bad people.
Okay.
I know that's not like, because then people will be like, well, what about, and they'll say the worst person in the world.
Of course.
I think most people are complex. Mm-hmm. Not saying there aren't people that are like, doing really horrible things, but I think that most people are complex, and that I think oftentimes we're very quick to say this is a good person or this is a bad person. And that's why I love superheroes so much, like the Marvel shows, because they help you. Some of these they let you identify with the villain. The sympathetic villain is always something that I find so interesting, where it's just because even there's so many ways that you can go in your life, and there are certain things that are going to push you to be a villain and push you to be a hero, and most people have the capability to be both. And I don't like to write people off as good or bad. Mm-hmm. If somebody's doing something that's like hurtful to me, I still try to approach with curiosity and empathy. Why is it that you're feeling this way?
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
Like that, that especially in storytelling, it's like, a villain with like proper motivation is actually, it's like, but you're like, well, but I understand their actions are incorrect, but I understand where it's coming from. Like in that, it's like, oh, why do I attach to this or identify or what relate to this thing? And it's like, Well, because it's the complexity.
And that's human. Like, if people are human, not everybody. I mean, I've done things in my life that I'm not proud of. And I think, like, there were times in my life that I was mean. I really focus on trying to be, as I get older, I really try to focus on being kinder and more empathetic. And I think back on who I was and some of the things that I did. And instead of, like, shaming myself or guilting myself for that, thinking, okay, like, well, how can I learn from that and be a better person now? And how does that serve me and my happiness? And how does that serve others that are around me?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's okay to want to be happy. And it's okay to want to feel good. And it's okay if, like, being nicer also makes you feel good, because they're like, well, you're just doing this for selfish reasons. It's okay to want to feel good, you know? Yeah. It's okay to want to be happy and have some of those things serve you as well.
And that goes back to the weird, like, you know, the this or that conversation of, like, sometimes when people see somebody being happy, they're like, oh, you just got it all figured out. And it's like, no, I just had a good day today.
Yeah.
Like, that was it. Like, again, this or that. You're either miserable or you're the happiest person ever. And it's
you
like,
give $1 to the person that's on the side of the road, and people are like, well, you're just doing that to make yourself feel good. Is there anything wrong with that?
Is there something wrong
they
with
have $1 and I feel good. Like, can't that both be okay?
I helped, and that's an okay thing. Yeah, it's not just,
I'm going to give them $1 and still feel bad about myself.
Right.
Why? Like, why?
Yeah. Why can't I just have the small victory and maybe they get a small victory too?
Yes.
And, like, who cares?
It's okay to, like, help other people and have that also feel good for you.
And that empathy piece is also, like, so huge and such a difficult thing to have too. And I think
it takes practice.
It does. And I think it's, while a thing that I think gets acknowledged more, I don't think it's a thing that a lot of people are leading with that much, of just, like, understanding, again, the this or that mentality, or the, like, you either think the same way I do or you don't and I hate you, you know, whatever. But, like, even, you know, as a example, like, you know, there's one of the companies that I work with, very transparent, like, there was a person who got hired at this company and found themselves in a position of power, who I will absolutely always go on record of saying, literally one of the worst people I've ever met in my life. 100%.
Yeah.
One of the worst people. But still, in the back of my mind, I'm still empathetically curious of, but why?
Why? Yes.
Why? Like, I don't like the way you talk to me or to other people. I can clearly tell, like, and everybody else can see it too, that you're absolutely insane and you get fired and all this stuff, you know. Everybody's understanding of it. It's like, yeah, no, that's just an effed up situation. Yeah. And I can sit and I can say, I don't like that person. But I also am doing that with the caveat of, but
how do you become that way?
Like, how are you here? And how are you taking this out on everybody else? Because that's what you're doing. You're projecting your anger and your sadness onto everybody else. And so I'm like, man, why?
How does that happen? Yeah. And I think sometimes people confuse reasons and excuses. Like, we can try to find out why somebody is, like, if somebody's being mean, like, trying to find out why that person's being mean and saying, like, well, you know, this was their growing up situation and they were never taught these things, or they were abused or whatever, and all those things. Like, that's not an excuse for the behavior, but it helps us understand the behavior. And then it helps us, like, humanize that person, you know. And it gets tricky, because, like, you don't want to be saying, well, then that's okay. Like, that doesn't make it okay, but it gives you more insight and more empathy into, like, why is this person. And I, you know, one thing that I learned in therapy was always just approach with curiosity.
Yeah.
So instead, if somebody says, like, oh, I believe the earth is flat, instead of saying, like, no, that's insane, you would say, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
Why do you believe that?
Yes.
Please tell me why you believe that and how you got there.
And again, this or that, just because you listen and are curious to that person's opinion, all of a sudden doesn't mean that you agree, or that that's what side you're. It's like, someone can explain to me why they think the earth is flat, and I could be like, interesting.
Yeah.
And someone else could be listening and be like, you didn't tell them they're stupid, so you believe it? It's like, no, I just accept it for what it is, and that's what they think, and I'm not going to expend the energy on telling them why they're wrong. And I just, you know, it doesn't need to go any further than that. Like, it is what it is.
When there's beliefs that hurt other people is when it's, like, to me, it's like, I think believing the earth is flat is the most ridiculous thing that you can believe. But, like, if you're not in a position of power, if you're not in government and you're just sitting quietly in your home believing that the earth is flat, you're not really hurting anybody.
Right. Now, the hard part is there's a lot of people that are in positions of power who think insane things.
That's where, and again, it's not black or white. It's not like, oh, it's good or bad to think that the earth is flat. Like, it's, if you're sitting at home believing that, you're not hurting anybody. I'm fine with it. If you are now creating laws based on that belief, then it becomes a problem.
Now it's a little bit of an issue.
And then there's everything in between.
Right.
And there's a lot in between. And I think that's for me what I'm always striving for is like, what is the everything in between?
Mm-hmm. Nickey, we have talked about much stuff today. And this is not me being like, we got to stop, but I don't want to keep you here for 6 hours because I feel like we could just keep talking about all the things. I don't want to keep the listeners here for 6 hours either. But. I would love, because it has been brought up, and we've talked so much about the success and what that looks like and identifying what we really want in life and all this sort of stuff. What are some things like that are left on that bucket list that you do want to do, or like whether it's fun out there things of like, I'd love to eventually do this, or something super obtainable that you're like, I've just been meaning to set a date for myself to go do this thing. Like what's some of the stuff on your bucket list?
That's so interesting because I actually I really want to record a comedy special.
Yeah.
And so that is on my bucket list. And actually the set that I am building for that special has a lot to do with bucket lists.
That's amazing.
It does. Because I have a bit where I talk about how sometimes when bad things happen to me in my life, I just put them on my bucket list and cross them off.
That's, oh my God, what a hack. That's so good.
Right, yeah. And so that kind of comes back throughout the set that I'm building of like things that I want to do and things that I have done. And which of those do I see as like accomplishments and but things that I do want to accomplish, I do want to record a special. A lot of it, back when I started, everybody wanted to record albums, but now it's like so easy to do video with that as well. I'd love to record a special. I've never had merch.
Really?
I have never had merch, and when I tell comics that, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you wasted like years of income, the extra income,
millions of dollars."
Being able to stand out there at a table I never was like inspired enough by one of my bits to like turn it into merch, and it just felt like this is more stuff I got to carry, it's more stuff I got to do, and I just was like so focused on what I was doing on stage I never did it. So I would love to do merch. I've always wanted to see a play from the opera box.
Okay.
Like like you see in like movies and stuff where they're in the little opera box with the
little eye thing.
It's just like a silly thing that's always been on my list. I'm like, I just want to be up there.
I love that.
The little binoculars.
That's so good.
And I would love to go to Punxsutawney for Groundhog Day some year.
Okay.
That's on my bucket list. I love Groundhog Day. It's like my favorite holiday.
He just became a dad, right?
Did Phil become a dad?
I think Phil's a dad. I feel like I saw a post.
I follow him on Instagram, and I'm so sorry I missed that, Phil. I'm very happy for you.
I feel like I saw a post that was like, this is Phil's first Groundhog Day as a dad. And
amazing.
Everyone's like, oh, he has kids. Oh,
I missed that. But I do. I watch the broadcast every year. That's and like so I watched it with my son and his cousins this year because we were in Indianapolis for Royal Rumble, which was the same weekend as Groundhog Day. I would love to see a Royal Rumble. That's on my bucket list. And like if I could visit any place in the world, it would be Easter Island.
Ooh, okay.
Those big stone heads, and apparently there's bodies under the ground as well that are part.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's like the thing that I would love to see.
Yeah.
So that's the short. I'm sure there's other stuff on there too.
You just
Some of
gave
it's
me,
just
like, the
like
coolest list.
have my laundry done.
Right. Yeah. The active day-to-day bucket list of get the laundry done, get the stuff. That was just the coolest list of things. Like,
thank you.
Because again, like a bucket list and all that sort of stuff has become such a prominent part of my life that I do now intentionally bring that up in conversations. And a lot of times people are kind of like, I gotta think of. I don't know any of my goals and dreams actually. Now when you ask me, so I love that you were just like, yep, this and that and this and that. Not to put you on the spot, even though I've been asking you questions for about an hour and a half. And this is something that we can talk about at a different time. But I do want to open the door to the conversation. It is on my bucket list to produce, direct, and film a comedy special.
Oh, okay.
So if there is ever the opportunity that you genuinely want to make that happen, I myself, and I know I have a crew of people who would be down to do that.
Okay.
We could simultaneously check something off the bucket
Oh
list.
my gosh, that would be magical.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're theming it with the set and the bucket list, I'm like, that feels like one that makes sense for me to do.
It does, yeah.
So a later conversation for a
Okay.
later time, but I absolutely am just going to take the opportunity to tell you, if and when that time comes, and if you don't already have some people lined up, I want to be the one that helps you produce that. And
I
would
love this, actually.
I
I think that would be really cool for us, both to...
It is, again, because, I've loved comedy forever. I've now found myself in the creative and filmmaking world and all this sort of stuff. Added it to my bucket list a couple years ago of directing a comedy special.
That would be so cool.
And if we can make that happen, I would love to help
Okay.
you cross that off your list and make that happen. Nickey, I have one final question. Unless there is anything major that you're like, dude, we've talked about a lot, but we gotta talk about this thing. No abductions by aliens, or met a wrestler one time, or anything crazy. Nothing big.
I do want to ask you though, 'cause I said, if I could go anywhere, I would go to Easter Island. Do you have a place that if you could go anywhere?
I feel like I'm less of a locations person, and I'm more of an experiences person. And I know those are kind of the same thing, but I'm being a big fan of horror movies, which also makes me a big fan of paranormal places and stuff like that. That's kind of the places that are on my list. Weird places of I don't know, a Roswell, or even something that's here in Ohio, like the Serpent Mounds. If you're familiar with those.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been. I don't think. And just things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but of course, an Easter Island would be dope, or any an ancient civilization site would be really cool to go see. But I also oddly am weird about traveling, and I don't love traveling for some reason.
It's not great.
Yeah. And so I'm also I would love to see these places, but can any of them just be Serpent Mound? I'm I'll go there because it's probably a couple hours from here in Columbus.
Right.
That's pretty obtainable. I feel like my goals list is more on the creation or experience side, with only a few of those smaller places. Another random one would be I don't know if you're familiar, if you don't really like spooky stuff, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the really popular ghost hunters from back in the day. All the Conjuring movies are made about them and stuff like that. They have a museum of all of these different haunted or cursed artifacts that they have collected from all over the world.
Yeah.
That would be a place that I would love to just go and experience. Because of course, everyone's oh my God, you walk in and don't look at that doll or it'll haunt you. And I'm
have you been to New Orleans?
I haven't.
Okay,
I haven't.
go to New
It's
Orleans.
Pretty spooky place,
there's a
right?
lot of there's a lot of voodoo stuff, and there's lots of places you can visit that are okay, this place is haunted. The hotel that I stayed in was haunted.
See,
yeah.
As a lover of all things spooky, and I can't say I would be terrified if something happened, but I've never had a weird experience. Never and I know so many people are I saw a ghost in a hallway, and I'm I've never once.
This is your bucket list.
Have I?
Do you want to
kind of is see a ghost. Yeah,
I don't know how I make this happen. But
what's funny is I did take an item off my bucket list because I determined that it actually might be unsafe to do given everyone's response to it. On my bucket list, I did have at one point in time use a Ouija board because I was
You never did as a kid?
I never did. No.
Oh, I did it as a kid.
Did you?
Yeah. It's
Are you
spooky.
cursed or
I don't know.
Fine? Yeah, see. Here's the thing. Here's my argument. Because everybody I've brought that up to, they're dude, don't. I get it.
Mattel makes it. How dangerous can it be?
That's my exact point. That is exactly what I say. I'm I can find these in Walmart.
Yeah.
Is it really that dangerous? And people are dude, don't. And so by enough people telling me to not, I actually took it off the list. Fine. I guess I won't
do it.
Welcome a demon. We'll do it.
Okay.
We'll do it.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, in the next episode, Nickey's gonna return. We will be here with a
Ouija
board.
Do it in here.
Yes.
You don't want to do it in a graveyard. Don't do it anywhere nuts. But do it in a CVS or something. I don't know.
Just buy it and sit in the aisle.
Right. What are you guys doing here? We're safely using this Ouija board.
Yeah. I won't do it at home. I don't want to welcome the demons in my home.
Yeah.
But that's a danger too. If demons are real, they can't attach themselves to people. So I could take a demon home. Those are the parts where
No, I did it at a slumber party, and it was just
see,
it was all just everybody trying to figure out who was pushing it.
Right.
Or you're pushing it, or you're pushing it.
Exactly.
And it was
and that's
really,
why I'm
Maybe we're all cursed though.
Right, but that's the thing. I'm like having that fun experience of like not knowing if someone, I'm like that in itself would be fun.
Yeah.
But so many people are like, dude, don't. And I'm like,
so
they're
crazy.
in Walmart. It can't be that bad. And they're like, there's just some crazy stuff going on. So maybe I'll bring it back. Maybe you talk me back into it. I didn't need to be persuaded.
Maybe we'll do it.
Yes.
We'll do it, and then we'll film a comedy show, then we'll see what all bad happens.
That's you know how there's always an opening like sketch or something
too. Like us just doing a Ouija board.
Us just doing a Ouija board, and then it introduces your comedy special, and then you go out and do comedy.
I love every bit of this, and and this is promo for it. So.
Yep, this is it.
Yeah.
Nickey, I have one final question before we go find a Ouija board somewhere.
I think I might know what it is.
I end every episode with the same question. So yeah, you probably have a good idea. So we're going to play pretend again. And right now I want you to pretend that everybody everywhere can hear you speak. You got a live mic. It's attached to everybody. And you have this moment right now to share one thing with every single person. What are you telling them? What do you really want them to hear?
Zipper merge.
Go on.
Zipper merge. Listen, some people who follow me on social media will laugh at this because I've been going on about this for quite some time. So the idea of zipper merging on the highway is that you've got two lanes. One of your lanes is ending. And a lot of people will see that if this lane is the one continuing and this one's ending, people will start to merge here, even though this lane ends here. Mm-hmm. The idea of zipper merging is that you use both lanes until the lane ends. So you drive all the way down to the merge point, and then everybody merges together like a zipper.
Okay, yeah.
Because if you have all these cars here, and you have an empty lane, and all these people are getting over early, you're just clogging up one lane of traffic, and then you have an empty lane that nobody's using, and then you have people flying down to the end of it and trying to sneak in at the end. And everybody sees that person sneaking in at the end as a jerk.
Right.
And they don't want to let them in because they're cutting ahead. But if everybody used both lanes and then harmoniously zippered together, then you're actually keeping the flow of traffic going easier. This is not just about traffic, though, because this is how I believe life should be, is that we need to zipper merge more in life, because it takes both lanes agreeing for it to work properly. You have to have people using the empty lane and driving to the end, and then the people who are in the lane that is continuing, they have to let people in one by one for it to work. You neither can be greedy. You can't drive to the end of the empty lane to cut ahead and be greedy, but you also can't be greedy by not letting people in on the other side. So what I love about this is that not only is it really great for traffic, and it would be great if people did this, but I think it just applies really well to life, is that if we can all just zipper merge a little bit more.
I absolutely love that. And you had me at the beginning. I literally was like, this is the most educational answer, just straightforward.
It really, like, there are studies that say it increases traffic flow by 40%. But yeah, I mean, yeah. But you rarely see it, is the thing. And I think that speaks not only to traffic, but just us as people, is that everybody wants to get ahead. They want to be first. They want to drive down to that merge point to be first. Or they want to block people out because they don't want somebody to get ahead of them. But it's okay to let some people ahead, and then it's okay to take your turn.
I absolutely love that. I love that so much. That is so good. And honestly, this entire conversation was an absolute blast.
Thank you.
Like,
I had a blast too. I think we've made some plans.
I think we have.
To either conjure the dead or make a special or both.
And go to the Royal Rumble. That's all three of these things we're about to be going and doing. I cannot thank you enough for being down to be on the show, giving me your time, being open to talk about all the things, and make these super fun plans of getting haunted, going to the Royal Rumble, and filming a comedy special, all these different things.
I love it.
For real, though, I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with me today.
Thank you for having
chatting
me. I had a great
about
time
all the things. Yeah. I'm still I've been like I said, I've been waiting for it for a while. You've been on the list, and I'm so happy to check you off that list. And this was just such a fun conversation. So I appreciate you so very much.
Thank you.
And
I had a great time.
Before we say goodbye to everybody, do you want people to find you online or anything that you do? Where can they do that at?
I am at Nickey Wink. That's NickeyWink. I could sing it. NickeyWink. WYNK.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
That
I'm
is
so sorry.
Nope. No sorry.
It is Nickey, like the mouse, but with an N, and then WYNK. And I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but I just tell people to follow me on Instagram. I'm on TikTok too, but I don't do a whole lot on TikTok. So Instagram's the best place to find me. I post my shows and mirror selfies in my stories so that you can see what I'm doing and so that the algorithm likes it.
Yes, perfect. This was a blast, and now the Nickey Wink song will be stuck in my head.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
The rest of the day.
Hopefully, the internet doesn't shut you down for copyright.
We'll figure it out. Nickey, thank you so much.